The sterile hum of the heart monitor was suddenly interrupted by a piercing beep. Its sound, sharp and relentless, reverberated throughout the NICU, sending a chill through the air. The numbers on the monitor were no longer steady. They flickered and fluctuated erratically. A wave of urgency surged through the room as the familiar code broke the quiet. Code blue. Room 12. The announcement echoed down the hallway. The panic in the voice of the nurse on the intercom was palpable. Inside room 12, time seemed to stop as the medical team rushed into action. Dr. Lucas Michaels, the head physician, stood by the incubator, his normally calm face twisted in a mask of grim determination. His hands, steady in the face of countless life-or-death moments, now trembled as he adjusted the ventilator. Jack Turner, just 4 months old, lay still in the incubator, his tiny chest rising and falling irregularly, fighting for breath. His heart had stopped, and every second now mattered. Welcome to the HeartForce channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through dog stories. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you're listening to this video. And if you have any stories about my loyal friend, please share them with us. Outside the room, Emma Turner, a young single mother, pressed her face against the glass, watching the chaos unfold. Her heart raced in her chest as she desperately clung to the hope that her son, her baby, would make it through. She couldn't bear to look away, yet the sight before her was more than she could handle. She had been here before, countless times in the past, dealing with small illnesses and doctor visits, but this was different. Jack's condition had worsened over the past few days, and what seemed like a routine fever had spiraled into something far more dangerous. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, streaking down her cheeks as she placed her trembling hands on the cold window. "Please, God," she whispered, barely able to speak. "Not my baby. Don't take him from me. He's all I have left." Inside the room, the team worked frantically, moving with practiced precision. The beep of the heart monitor was joined by the sharp clatter of equipment being adjusted. Dr. Michaels barked orders as he monitored the baby's vitals. He was calm, professional, but Emma knew that even he couldn't hide the anxiety in his eyes. They were losing him. And then, just as quickly as it had started, something strange happened. Through the automatic doors of the hospital's main entrance, a golden retriever appeared. His fur, a rich shade of honey, glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. His steps were silent, but his presence was impossible to ignore. There was something extraordinary about this dog. He was large, but moved with a grace and purpose that didn't seem to belong in a hospital. His brown eyes were filled with an ancient wisdom, as though he had been here before, and his every step was deliberate. Emma, still standing by the window, noticed the dog as he passed the nurse's station. Her brow furrowed in confusion, and for a split second, she wondered if the exhaustion of the long nights had begun to cloud her perception. The dog moved with uncanny certainty, weaving through the corridors with no tags or collar, as though he knew exactly where he was going. The nurse at the station barely glanced up, as though the dog was a familiar presence. But Emma's heart skipped a beat when the dog stopped outside room 12. His ears perked at the sound of her muffled sobs, and Emma, in that moment of panic, felt a sudden, inexplicable connection to him. She watched as the dog stood for a moment, staring through the window at her, and then, without warning, he slipped quietly through the door to the NICU. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The chaos of the room seemed to subside as the dog made his way toward the incubator. No one noticed him at first, too consumed with their work, but Emma did. She saw it in his eyes as he sat beside the incubator, positioning himself with a tenderness that seemed almost human. Something profound happened in that moment. The frantic energy in the room settled like dust after a storm. The doctors and nurses, so focused on their tasks, didn't notice the shift, but Emma felt it. The air felt heavier, more charged with an unspoken understanding. Jack's heart monitor, still flickering, began to steady. His breathing, though weak, became more regular. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The room was changing. The energy had changed, and Emma could feel it deep in her chest, that flicker of hope. The golden retriever remained by the incubator, his gaze unwavering, as if keeping vigil over the tiny life in the fragile glass box. The medical team continued their efforts, but Emma couldn't tear her eyes away from the dog. There was something about him, something that brought her peace in the midst of the storm. She barely noticed when Dr. Michaels moved over to her, a look of confusion crossing his features as he watched the dog. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice sharp but filled with curiosity. Emma shook her head, barely able to speak. "I don't know, but I think he's here to help." Emma's mind raced as she watched the dog's steady presence by Jack's side. She had no words to describe the sense of peace that seemed to envelop the room. In the chaos of the medical team, amidst the beeping machines and the cold, mechanical precision of the doctors, this dog, this golden retriever, was the calm at the center of the storm. For a moment, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was a sign that her baby might have a chance. She had always believed in the power of love and hope, but she had never thought it would come in the form of a dog, an animal who had somehow found his way into a hospital NICU where he wasn't supposed to be. Dr. Michaels stepped forward, glancing at the dog and then back at Emma. "What is this?" he muttered under his breath, his professional facade slipping for the first time that night. The dog, without a collar or tags, simply sat by the incubator, his eyes fixed on Jack, as though nothing else mattered. "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I think he's here for a reason." The nurse at the door, a young woman named Rachel, looked up from the clipboard she was holding. She had seen the dog too, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. The strange serenity in the room had everyone on edge, but no one dared to ask the question that loomed in the air. What was this dog doing here? Linda Parker, a nurse who had been working the night shift in the NICU for over a decade, entered the room just then. She paused, her eyes catching the golden retriever sitting by the incubator. She froze for a moment, the blood draining from her face. The dog's presence stirred something deep within her, something she thought she had buried years ago. A memory, a painful, familiar memory of her own son, Michael. Linda had been a pediatric surgeon once, one of the hospital's brightest talents. But that was before the storm that had destroyed her career. Before the night she lost Michael. Her son had been only 6 years old when he died in the hospital, caught in a web of mistakes, small errors that, when added together, led to an unthinkable tragedy. A tragic night she could never forget. She had lost Michael, but she had also lost herself, her career, her reputation, her life's work. The hospital had turned its back on her, swept the incident under the rug, and blamed her for the mistakes that had led to Michael's death. But the truth was buried under layers of bureaucracy, and Linda had been left to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. She had sworn to never trust the hospital again, but something in the golden retriever's eyes made her question that resolve. She had seen that same calmness in Michael's therapy dog, Hero, years ago. Hero had been the only constant in Michael's short life, the only one who had been there during the long, painful nights of hospital stays. "Linda," Rachel's voice broke through her reverie. Linda blinked, looking up to see the nurse watching her closely. The golden retriever didn't take his eyes off Jack, who now seemed slightly more stable, his vitals slowly returning to normal. A small miracle. Linda moved forward, her experience kicking in. "Dr. Michaels, I think we should run another round of tests. We may be seeing some initial signs of improvement, but we need to stay ahead of this." Dr. Michaels nodded sharply, though his gaze kept flicking back to the dog, as if he were waiting for an explanation. "All right, keep me posted," he said, though his voice lacked its usual authority. Linda watched the golden retriever one more time. "Stay, boy," she whispered, knowing that something beyond the ordinary was happening in this room. She wasn't sure if it was divine intervention, fate, or simply an animal with an uncanny intuition, but something in her gut told her that this dog was here for a reason. Later that night, when the chaos had died down and the hospital began to settle into the quiet of the late shift, Linda sat alone in the break room, her mind swirling. The memory of Michael's dog, Hero, haunted her. Hero had always known when something was wrong, when Michael needed help, when his breathing became labored. It had been Hero who had alerted the staff just before Michael's final crisis, sensing it long before the medical team did. And now, this golden retriever was acting in the same way. But how? Could this dog truly be the same one? The odds seemed impossible. Yet, something about him, the way he looked at Jack, the way he calmed the room, made Linda question everything she had thought she knew about healing. She couldn't shake the feeling that somehow this dog had come back to them, just as Hero had been there for Michael. But where had he been all these years? What brought him to St. Mark's now? Linda stood up abruptly, wiping away the tears she hadn't realized she had shed. She had to find out more. She had to understand why this dog, who had disappeared after Michael's death, was here now. She had lost so much in her life. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could find some form of redemption in this miracle. As she left the break room, she found herself glancing back at the NICU. Through the glass windows, she saw the golden retriever once more, lying quietly by Jack's side, his head resting on his paws as though keeping a silent vigil. His presence was a beacon of hope, a strange yet powerful force that seemed to be healing more than just the baby in that incubator. The next day, the storm raged on outside, but inside St. Mark's Hospital, a subtle calm had settled into the NICU. The golden retriever, who had mysteriously appeared just hours earlier, had been allowed to stay by Jack's incubator. His presence, once an enigma, had become a source of quiet reassurance for Emma. Each time she looked at him, she felt a small flicker of hope, a reminder that there might still be a chance for her son. The medical team, though skeptical about the dog's presence, couldn't deny the improvements in Jack's condition. His heart rate had stabilized, his oxygen levels had improved, and for the first time in days, the baby seemed to be breathing more easily. "Have you seen this?" Rachel, the nurse, whispered to Linda, her voice tinged with disbelief. She was holding Jack's latest chart, and even she had to admit that the changes were remarkable. Linda nodded slowly, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She couldn't explain what was happening, but she had seen enough to know that something extraordinary was at play. The golden retriever's presence seemed to soothe Jack in a way no medical intervention could. Linda had seen Hero do the same for Michael in the past, and it made her wonder, was this some sort of sign? Or perhaps a message she was meant to understand? As she watched the dog settle beside Jack's incubator once more, Linda found herself pondering the impossible. Could this be Hero? Could it be the same dog who had once been Michael's faithful companion? She shook her head. It didn't make sense. Hero had disappeared after Michael's death, leaving behind a hole in her heart that had never fully healed. And yet, here was this dog, exuding the same quiet strength, the same sense of duty that Hero had shown all those years ago. There were too many coincidences for it to be anything else. Outside the NICU, Emma was struggling to hold herself together. The last few days had felt like a never-ending whirlwind. The bills had piled up, the medical staff had been kind but distant, and she had felt so alone in this fight for her son's life. But then the dog had appeared, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she wasn't alone. She didn't know how or why, but she could feel something changing, something deep within her. She watched the dog lie quietly by Jack's side, his presence a silent promise that things might just turn out all right. Dr. Michaels, who had been the one to declare the code blue, was still shaken by what had happened. He had seen countless cases in his career, but this was different. The golden retriever's impact was undeniable. Even if he couldn't bring himself to believe that the dog had any mystical power, there was no denying that Jack's condition had improved dramatically. "Rachel, keep an eye on Jack. I'll be right back," Dr. Michaels said, his voice sharp but distracted. He stepped out of the room and walked down the hall, stopping just outside the NICU doors. Linda had been waiting for him. "I don't know what's going on here, but something's changing," Dr. Michaels said, his voice low. He looked over his shoulder at the NICU, as if the dog might be listening. "I'm not sure what to make of this dog, but whatever is happening in there, it's working." Linda, her hands folded in front of her, didn't say anything right away. She knew better than to rush to conclusions. But she also knew that this hospital, this place where she had once held such hope, had been the source of so much pain for her. It had taken everything from her: her career, her son, her faith in the very system she had once believed in. Now, here she was back in this very hospital, caring for a baby she didn't know, all while dealing with the ghosts of her past. "I think this dog is something more than we realize," Linda said softly. "There's something about him. I've seen it before." Dr. Michaels looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Hero," she whispered. "Michael's therapy dog. He was the same way. Calm, caring. He knew when Michael needed help. And I think this dog, I think he's here for a reason." Dr. Michaels frowned, clearly skeptical. "You think this dog is what? The same one? After all these years?" Linda paused, her eyes searching his face. "I don't know, but I can't ignore what I'm feeling. This dog, he's making a difference, and we can't just brush it off." Dr. Michaels ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting in his expression. "This is a hospital, Linda. We deal with science, with facts, not myths." "I don't care about myths," Linda snapped, her voice rising slightly. "I care about saving lives. And if this dog can help save Jack, then I don't care how it happens. I just want to see him get better." Her words hung in the air between them. "Dr. Michaels looked at her for a long moment, his mind clearly wrestling with something he wasn't ready to admit. But in that moment, Linda saw a shift in his expression, just a flicker of understanding. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine. The medical team continued to monitor Jack's vitals, but there was a palpable change in the atmosphere of the NICU. The nurses were more relaxed, the tension in the room lighter. Emma spent hours by Jack's side, and every time she looked at the golden retriever, she felt a small measure of peace. Later that evening, as the hospital grew quieter, Linda made her way back to the NICU. As she passed the nurse's station, she caught a glimpse of Dr. Michaels, deep in conversation with the hospital administrator. He appeared to be arguing, but his voice was too low to hear. Linda sighed and entered the NICU, her eyes immediately falling on Jack. The baby was resting, his breathing slow and steady. The golden retriever sat at his side, as if guarding him, his golden fur glowing in the soft light of the room. Emma looked up and smiled, her eyes full of gratitude. "He's really something, isn't he?" Linda nodded, watching the dog with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "He really is." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The NICU had never seen anything like this before. Dr. Michaels, though still skeptical, was forced to admit the undeniable. Jack's condition had improved dramatically since the golden retriever had entered the room. His heart rate was stable. His breathing was stronger, and for the first time since he had been admitted to the hospital, the doctors were beginning to believe he might survive. But not everyone was happy about it. Dr. Carter, the hospital's chief medical officer, had caught wind of the situation and wasn't pleased. It wasn't the dog itself that bothered him. He had seen plenty of therapy animals in his time, and he knew their value. But the circumstances surrounding this particular dog raised too many questions. Where had he come from? How had he found his way into the NICU unnoticed? Why was he having such a profound effect on the babies in the ward? Carter wasn't one for unexplained phenomena. He was a man of science, of facts, of protocols. He couldn't accept that this golden retriever, who appeared out of nowhere, could be anything more than an unusual coincidence. He was determined to put an end to the dog's presence in the hospital. That evening, Dr. Carter called an emergency staff meeting. The room was tense as the medical team gathered. Emma sat at the back of the room, her fingers nervously twisting in her lap. She hadn't been told the specifics of the meeting, but she could feel the undercurrent of unease in the air. She knew that the golden retriever had become a controversial subject, and she feared that they might try to take him away from her. Linda, too, felt a deep sense of foreboding. She knew Dr. Carter all too well. He was the one who had been responsible for the mistakes that had led to her son Michael's death. He had taken her career, her dignity, and her sense of purpose. She had worked under him for years without ever confronting the bitterness she felt, but now, as she listened to the murmurs around her, she couldn't ignore the resentment that bubbled to the surface. Dr. Carter stood at the front of the room, his stern eyes scanning the gathered staff. "This has gone too far," he began, his voice cold and detached. "We're a medical facility, not a sanctuary for stray animals. The presence of an unauthorized therapy dog in this NICU not only violates hospital protocol, but also jeopardizes the safety and well-being of our patients." Emma's heart sank. She glanced at Linda, but the nurse's face was unreadable. Emma felt a surge of desperation. Jack was her only hope, and the dog had made all the difference. If they took Hero away, what would happen to her son? Dr. Carter continued, his voice rising in authority. "I have already spoken to the board, and we're going to take the necessary steps to remove this dog from the premises. This is not a discussion. I'm simply informing you of the decision that's been made." The room was quiet for a moment, but then one voice rose in opposition. "I don't think we should make any decisions until we look at the data," Linda said, her voice calm but firm. She stood up from her seat, meeting Dr. Carter's gaze. "Since the dog arrival, Jack's condition has improved. We've seen tangible changes in his heart rate, his oxygen levels, and his general response to treatment. We can't just ignore that." Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed, and he shook his head. "We're not in the business of superstition, Linda," he said sharply. "We need solid medical evidence, not anecdotal stories about a dog. There's no place for this kind of nonsense in a hospital." "But what if the dog is helping? What if we're witnessing something that's beyond what we can understand right now?" Linda's voice was steady, but the weight of her words hung in the air. "Sometimes healing doesn't come in the form we expect. We have to be open to that." Dr. Carter clenched his jaw, clearly frustrated by her defiance. "This discussion is over. The dog will be removed." As he turned to leave, Linda spoke again, her voice low but determined. "I'm not done with this, Carter. You can't just sweep it under the rug like you did with me. I won't let you destroy someone else's life for your own convenience." The room fell silent. The staff was divided, but no one dared to challenge Dr. Carter's authority. Except Linda. She had been in the same position years ago, when her own career had been torn apart by a system more concerned with its reputation than with truth. She had let that happen once, but she wouldn't let it happen again. As the meeting adjourned, Emma approached Linda, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for standing up for him," she said, her voice shaking. "For standing up for Jack." Linda gave her a small, sad smile. "I'm just doing what I can, but we may be facing a fight, and this time I won't back down." Later that evening, Linda found herself standing outside the NICU, staring at the storm clouds gathering in the sky. The tension was palpable, both inside the hospital and in her heart. She could feel the weight of the past pressing against her chest. Every step she took in this building brought her closer to the painful memories of Michael. But now she realized that those memories didn't have to define her. She had a chance to make things right. She had a chance to fight for Jack's life, just as she had fought for Michael's and lost. This time, she wouldn't let anyone take that from her. As she turned to enter the NICU, she caught a glimpse of the golden retriever through the window, sitting beside Jack's incubator once more. The dog's steady gaze met hers, and she couldn't help but wonder, was this a sign? Was this the universe, or fate, or something else entirely, telling her that redemption was possible? It was hard to say, but for the first time in years, Linda felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The following days were tense, filled with uncertainty. St. Mars Hospital had never been so divided. Dr. Carter, despite his outward confidence, was beginning to question his stance on the golden retriever. His decision to remove the dog had been met with resistance, especially from the nurses and some of the medical staff who had witnessed the undeniable improvements in Jack's condition. The situation was becoming more complicated by the minute. Linda, once a respected pediatric surgeon, was now standing at the center of a battle she hadn't anticipated, a battle for more than just Jack's life. This was about redemption. It was about the broken system that had torn her apart years ago and the chance to heal the wounds that had festered inside her for so long. But the tension wasn't just in the hospital, it was in Linda's heart as well. Every day, as she entered the NICU, she saw the golden retriever, This mysterious dog who seemed to carry the weight of something greater than anyone could explain. Every time he moved beside Jack's incubator, it reminded her of Hero, the dog who had been her son's constant companion. She couldn't ignore the similarities, the way Hero had always known when Michael needed help. And now, it was as if Hero had returned, in another form, to help Jack. Linda had fought for years to let go of the past, to stop holding onto the grief that had paralyzed her. But now, as she watched the dog by Jack's side, she couldn't deny that something was happening. She was witnessing a miracle unfold, a miracle that had the potential to change everything, not just for Jack, but for her as well. The pivotal moment came late one evening, when the storm outside had calmed and the hospital had quieted for the night. Jack's condition had stabilized enough that the doctors felt comfortable letting him rest. Emma had gone home for the night, her exhaustion evident in the way she moved. But she had left behind a piece of her heart in the NICU, her son, fighting to survive, and the dog who had somehow become his guardian angel. Linda was alone in the NICU, taking her usual rounds, when Dr. Carter entered. His face was tense, his shoulders stiff with the weight of the decision he knew he had to make. The hospital board had demanded a resolution to the situation, and Linda knew that the clock was ticking. "Linda," Dr. Carter began, his voice quieter than usual. "We need to talk." Linda turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What's this about?" "Dr." Carter hesitated, glancing toward Jack's incubator, where the golden retriever still lay by his side. "I've been going over the charts," he said, his voice low, "and I have to admit, the results are unexpected. The changes in Jack's condition since the dog's presence are real." Linda's heart skipped a beat. Was he admitting what she thought he was? "But," Dr. Carter continued, "there's still too many questions. I'm not convinced that this is something we should encourage. The board wants him removed, and frankly, I'm inclined to agree." Linda stood still, the weight of his words sinking in. "So, you just want to follow the board's orders?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "Without considering what's happening here? Without considering what Jack needs? What if the dog really is helping him?" Dr. Carter's face softened, but only slightly. "I'm not blind to what's happening. But this is a hospital, Linda. We can't just throw out our protocols every time something unexplainable happens. And yet, we've ignored the real problem for years," Linda said, her voice sharp now. "We've let bureaucracy and rules dictate who lives and who dies. I watched my son die because of mistakes made by the system, and I won't let that happen again. Not with Jack. Not with anyone." "Dr." Carter stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "What do you want me to do?" Linda looked at the golden retriever, who was now resting his head on Jack's incubator. She could feel the weight of the past and the future bearing down on her. "I want you to let the dog stay. I want you to give Jack the chance to live. And I want you to acknowledge that sometimes healing doesn't look like what we expect it to." The room was silent for a long time. Then Dr. Carter spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can do that." Linda took a deep breath. "Then at least don't take him away. Don't take away Jack's chance to heal. Don't take away the one thing that's making a difference." Dr. Carter's eyes softened, but he didn't answer right away. The tension in the room was thick, but Linda stood her ground. She wasn't just fighting for Jack anymore. She was fighting for everything she had lost and everything she had yet to gain. The decision was made later that night. Dr. Carter, in a quiet, unexpected move, presented the situation to the board with a new perspective. He recommended that the golden retriever be allowed to stay, not as a part of the official therapy program, but as a compassionate presence in NICU. He acknowledged that the results were still inconclusive, but that Jack's improvement couldn't be denied. To everyone's surprise, the board agreed. Jack's recovery continued to improve, and soon, the golden retriever became a fixture in the NICU. His presence was welcomed by most of the staff, though some still remained skeptical. But the change was undeniable. Jack began to thrive, and the room seemed to change every time the dog entered, as if his very presence brought a sense of calm to the chaotic environment. For Emma, the miracle of her son's survival was a testament to the power of hope, and to the dog who had become Jack's guardian angel. For Linda, it was the beginning of her own redemption. The hospital that had once taken everything from her was now giving her a chance to heal. And for Dr. Carter, it was a lesson in humility. He'd spent years hiding behind protocols and rules. But in the end, it was compassion and faith that had made the difference. As the weeks passed, the NICU began to change. The staff worked together with a renewed sense of purpose. Their bond strengthened by the extraordinary events they had witnessed. Linda found herself healing bit by bit, and Dr. Carter found a new way to lead, not with authority, but with empathy and understanding. And in the corner of the room, the golden retriever, who had brought them all together, continued his quiet watch, offering comfort to those who needed it most. Sometimes, healing comes in ways we least expect. It may not follow the path we envision or the protocols we trust, but the power of hope, love, and second chances can work miracles. This story reminds us that redemption is possible, and that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light. If this story of hope, redemption, and healing has touched your heart, we invite you to share your own experiences in the comments below. Every journey of healing is unique, and your story could inspire others facing similar challenges. Help us spread these messages of hope by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with friends and family who might need a reminder that miracles can happen in the most unexpected ways.